Yeah, awesome, thanks.
The guy's image photos.
You're the skipper.
Your sports channel.
There, you two can work together. How about that?
You're what?
Skipping on Thursday. Are you? You're not in Thursday. I should just couple Stephanie outside.
Hold on. Two different colors.
Okay, guys. So we're gonna. I think we're ready to go. So we're gonna get started. So thanks for coming. Taking time out of a Saturday night. It's pretty impressive that we got anybody out. So that's great. Tonight's really informal. Tonight's just about me kind of sharing what I know about the 5-rock rule. Open discussion, obviously. So tonight's the night. If there's any questions, we'll try and let you guys talk through some different scenarios as well. In a lot of what we'll kind of touch on, there may not be a right or a wrong answer. So I think tonight's, like I say, a good night to ask questions, to try and answer questions, to have some good discussion, and you know, I think for some of you that are coaching teams, for some of you that are obviously playing with the 5-rock rule, it's a good time of the year to start to think about it and get a grasp on it, and maybe get a leg up on a bit of the competition for sure. So like I say, very informal. I was telling somebody had asked how long is this going to be, and it could be 15 minutes, and it might be 2 hours. I have no idea. You know, up in Saskatoon, we had some good discussion and some questions, and it was great. So yeah, I'd encourage you anytime to feel free to fire away with anything. We'll go through a bunch of things. We're going to go through a little slideshow first, and then we're going to touch on a lot of the points within that as we go. And just like I say, just try and get a little bit of a handle and a grasp on things for you. So thanks again for being here. So the 5-rock rule. Obviously, it will create more offense, steals, fewer blanks. I think that goes without saying. Certainly going to be potentially more challenging to play. Doesn't have to be. You know, obviously the only time we've really seen it is in slams, Grand Slams on TV. That's kind of with respect to some of the handouts that you've gotten. That's where the stats are coming from. So all of the 5-rock rule games to date, with respect to the slams, because that's basically up until the start of this year the only events that it's been played in. So first step is to figure out or to understand what it is. So what the rule is exactly. The team with hammer is now allowed to throw 2 guards in the free guard zone as well that can't initially be removed. So guards can be removed after the 5th rock of the end. So does that make sense? I mean, the first step is to understand the rule itself. So everyone good with that? Everyone good with where the free guard zone is? I think the one little sheet there that we'll talk about in a little bit, it's highlighted in gray. So if you don't know or if you're not sure, that's the free guard zone, kind of mapped out there. And basically, the team with last rock is allowed to throw a second guard that can't be hit immediately. So that's the gist of it. It doesn't really change too much for the team without last rock. They can still throw their two guards that can't be hit immediately, but certainly it's a different scenario now for the team with hammer. The extra guard will in most cases be a corner guard utilized by the team with hammer when down or in a close game and needing to score more than 1 point, or wanting to try and score more than 1 point, obviously. When up or in control or just needing a single score, the team with hammer may opt not to utilize the 5-rock rule. And there will be ends that you see it not used at all. So one note, with the additional rock out front, teams placing corner guards need to make sure they don't block off their path to the 4-foot. So that's going to lead to some discussion later on. We'll have a little chit chat about kind of the corner guards when you do have hammer and what are your options with respect to that? What are some things that you need to take into account? The team without hammer will likely play a normal end when down, but has to decide how to defend against 2 corner guards and what to do with their initial 3 rocks when in a close game or in control of the game. So that, in a nutshell, is kind of the challenge, I guess, right? So, you know, it does affect, even though it's the team more with hammer, you know, that this rule is about. It does affect both teams in that sense, for sure. So both teams will be playing more freezes, tap backs, potentially run backs that can help turn the tide of an end to their favor, with extra emphasis on rock positioning, controlling at least one side of the sheet, and dictating which part of the sheet the end is played. So some important points in there. We'll talk a little more about each of those two as we go.
Pat, you need to explain who that fellow was. I don't think a lot of the young people would know that.
Ah. Anyone know that person? Yeah, that's, what's that? No, that's Bob Pickering. Yeah, so he was famous for exactly what you see there. This was a guard, I think. So, yeah, Bob Pickering. So he won 4 straight Saskatchewan provincial championships. Oh, it was like 68 to 72, maybe. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, some pretty neat stories. That was back in the day. He played in the Briars back in the day where it was just a round robin, and the winner of the round robin won. And so, yeah, some neat stories. The one year in particular, they thought they had it won, and I think it was maybe Don Duguid that made just an anyways, we're getting off topic, but that's who that is. Teams with hammer will need to be precise on their hits, oftentimes needing to move multiple rocks at a time, especially early in ends. Does that make sense? Especially if they're trying to utilize the rule to its full capability, right? And if the other team has made it difficult on them by placing the rocks kind of up the center. So we'll get into that for sure as we go. So the one big difference with the 5-rock rule is you know, being 2 up is no longer really comfortable. It's not extremely safe anymore. So game control is now at least, if not 3 up, if not more, to be quite honest, because certainly there is always a chance for a comeback to a certain extent, for sure. Remember, once you've played the first 5 rocks, you're now playing a normal game, and not every end will incorporate the 5-rock rule. So, a few things. Remember, prior to every end, to have a preferred outcome, an acceptable outcome, and an outcome to avoid at all costs in helping drive the decision making. And obviously, same as the 4-rock rule, same as rules before that, consider the following: score, ice conditions, hammer, game management, end management, team and opposition performance, strengths and weaknesses and tendencies. So all of that is the same. All of those factors will always come into play. You know, there are a few differences potentially with this rule, but a lot of things are similar. The game hasn't been changed, you know, completely by any means, and I think that's important to remember for sure. So, I handed out a couple of things. The first one that I want to just talk about is this sheet right here. So I think this is an important sheet, and this one is the one that as teams, as coaches, I think it's important to kind of bring to the attention of your players. And it's about the few points on this last couple of slides here. Whether it be a game plan or an end plan, it's really important to have a thought in mind about what you really want to have happen in that end. So your preferred outcome, okay, a goal for the end. Really important to start off every end, games for sure, but every end with that as well. There's going to be a lot of, with the 5 rock rule, potentially more scenarios, more decision making that has to occur. So having a good end plan off the bat is going to be important, just to even help drive some of your decision making throughout the end, but certainly the first few rocks at the end. So I think, though, important to have a thought not only on what you want to have happen, but also what you're okay with happening, and also what you really want to try and avoid. So three things in mind with that. This little sheet you can utilize as far as different scenarios as well, and we'll come into that when we get talking about the other handout as well. But it's okay to have certain scenarios kind of planned or mapped out with respect to, you know, the first couple ends of the game, maybe the last couple ends, and what you want or what you feel like you want to do as a team in those situations. But also it's important to kind of journal or record what happens with your team in those situations, because you may find that, you know, what the numbers say on this sheet isn't exactly what you guys are good at for some reason. You know, you may go against the numbers a little bit and be better one up without coming home versus one down with, or whatever, right? Whatever the scenario may be. So important to keep track. In a lot of these cases, like I say, there's no right or wrong. What's right is what's best for your team, and what you have success with. So that's a little sheet that can kind of help you out or help guide those discussions, so that at least there's a bit of a plan. Now, can you plan for everything? Can you plan for every scenario? Is every end going to kind of go according to your plan? Of course not. It doesn't matter who you are, that's not going to happen. So can you memorize every single type of scenario? Not really. Gets pretty tough, right? So you still have to learn how to think, how to almost have a philosophy in mind of how you want to approach an end, and we'll talk about that as well. Okay, so I think the one point, if there's only one thing you all take home from this, it might be this next little point that we make. And that is, use the strategy that you can back up with your team's shot-making ability. Okay, so you have to really manage your team. You have to have a good look at your team first, right from skip down to lead, or lead up to skip, whichever way you want to go. But you really need to look at the capabilities and basically then create a strategy accordingly. And whether that's, you know, full aggressive utilization of the 5 rock rule, or if it's, you know, being a little safer, a little more cautious, and not using it to its full capability, but using it smartly. You have to, there's basically a constant balancing act that a skip needs to go through in their mind, or team needs to go through as a whole, to push the limits, yet not cross the line where, you know, the shots become too difficult, or the capabilities don't match up to the shots that you're left with. So really important to keep that in mind. Make sure the skip and on down the lineup have what I would call probable makes, meaning not Hail Mary shots all the time. Shots that, you know, a good percentage of the time, you know, with the given capabilities at that time, that you can have a good chance of making. Really as simple as that. And the strategy can adjust accordingly as that changes, or when that changes. But I think that's really important. You know, I think there's going to be teams early this year that have seen it on TV and expect that they can, you know, throw the 2 corner guards every time they have last rock, and they're going to make 2 run back doubles and then start to use those corner guards, right? But at the end of the day, you have to be able to make those. Otherwise, you're not going to utilize the corner guards, and it's not really going to matter. So I think that's, if you're going to take one thing home, it's match the strategy and how hard you push it with kind of what you're capable of as a team. And it's a good time of the year to start thinking about that, because that may lead to kind of certain practice plans of things that a team wants to improve based then on this rule, so that you can maybe start utilizing it a little more to your advantage as well. Okay? It's okay to be patient. I think you almost want to emphasize this more now, I guess, because there is more opportunity for offense and more rocks in play, but it's okay to be patient. It's okay to still pick your spots as a team. It's really important to, when you're not at your best, stay in games or learn how to stay in games. And it's also, on the flip side, important to strive to dictate games when you are, or your team is, on top of their game. So again, those are all little things that skips and teams try to manage. That, again, that's part of the balancing act as well, is trying to see when things are good, and then maybe learning that you can push it at those times, and when there's a little bit of a struggle, you can still stay in games with this rule. It's just not beating yourself. Questions? All good so far? All right. Next point here. Okay, so because we can't really memorize every scenario, because we may have a plan for an end, but 2 shots in it might be completely changed based on, us as a team missing or the opposition missing, what have you. I just want to share with you, just through my experience, a few just different, I guess I call them philosophies for lack of a better term, but something that also, with respect to this end plan or game plan, something that can also, through an end, help with the decision making a little bit. So just three little points basically that I think you want to kind of in the back of your mind always kind of keep there kind of in case needed, or when to make a decision or what decision to make. So 3 things to think about. So with last rock, with hammer, have a way to score. And it seems pretty simple, but I think there's a little too much consensus, in my opinion, with the 5 rock rule now in place, that scoring a point is a failure, when it's still okay. It's still all right. I mean, maybe not the preferred outcome of an end, but wasn't the avoided all cost outcome either, I guarantee you that, right? So with hammer, have a way to score. And if you think about that in itself can help some decision making early, or certainly in the middle of an end, maybe even later in an end too as well. But I guarantee you that if you score a few single points with hammer, you're going to be better off than if those were steals, for sure. Okay? This one, with or without hammer, I think this is an important one. With or without hammer, strive to control at least half the sheet. So everyone know what I mean by control? Anybody not know what I mean by that? So basically, control could be a number of things. When I think of control, I think of kind of the area, above the tee line to maybe just in front of the house, maybe even top 4 to just in front of the house. And for me, control is, when you've got a rock in position where they can't really do much on that side, but you have a raise, you have it blocked off, you kind of control it, for lack of a better term, right? You kind of have that side as yours. And so I think it's important with this, because there's going to be a lot of play up the middle. There's going to be some ends there's going to be rocks in play. It's just a good thought to have in mind. And if you control at least half, so if you get both sides, chances are you're in really good shape. And so if you can make that happen, things are going to be good. Even though if you can control half of the sheet, things are okay. It's when you lose all of that control area, that's when things are going to get pretty dicey in a hurry for you. Okay? So that's a good one both ways, with and without last rock, just to have in mind from a skips or team's perspective. And that one can definitely help make some decisions a little easier for you if you keep that one also in mind. Third one is more without last rock. Strive to dictate how and where the end is played. Everyone know what I mean by that? So I'm thinking here more what part of the sheet the end is being played on, right? So without last rock, where would we like the end to be played preferably? In the middle, right? And there's going to be that may be the biggest change with this rule. There's going to be even more of a tug of war that way, right? The team that's that's trying to utilize the 5-rock rule is going to do everything they can to start getting use or using those corner guards. And the team without last rock is going to try and, as hard as they can, bring play to the middle, or at least have the opposition waste some rocks up the middle so that they can do whatever they want, peel or change to offense, or do whatever they want, depending on the end and the score. But that's a good rule of thumb to follow as well. I think if you have those 3 little points in mind, that's a really good start on your decision making as a team, as a skip, and together with a bit of an end plan and kind of your goal, acceptable, and what you want to avoid. That's gonna, or should, help a lot. In my opinion, better than trying to memorize everything. It's more about learning how to think and being able to then think on the fly, when you're left with a situation where there's an absolute mess, right? And knowing how to deal with that. And speaking of messes, because there's gonna be those ends that, either things go pretty well in the opinion of both teams, or if things don't go really well on one side or the other. That's usually when that occurs. And I think it's also important to have a process in mind for your teams for how to get through the strategy in that situation. Because there can be ends where there's 5 different shots, or there's rocks all over, and sometimes teams don't even get to certain options, right? So have a discussion as a team or with your teams, for the coaches here, on how you want to approach that. Because that can be difficult. It can be difficult for coaches when they're called out for a timeout in that situation, right? So the best few people that I ever played with, Brent Lang was probably, I think, the best person that I curled against that, for this situation. He'd come down, and I always was cursing in my mind, so I wish he'd go back to the other end, but he'd come down and he would just basically start with, okay, what's the best result for us? So that's what he would start. It didn't matter how tough the shot was, he'd say, okay, this shot gives us the best result. Now often you go beyond that because it's almost impossible, right, to make, but he'd always start with that. And then it was a process, right? And then to the next best, and then to the next best. And pretty soon, the probability or what they thought their chances are of making that shot matched with the shot they were talking about, right? And that's how they would kind of go about it. So not many people talk about or have a process in mind for a situation like that and how they want to approach it. But I think that's important now too, because there's going to be more of that, just plain and simple. So have a thought on that. It doesn't have to be in that regards, but I think it's important to have a little bit of a thought in mind with respect to that, just so you can work through those scenarios as well, and not kind of get stuck over here when there were certain things over on the other side or whatnot, maybe an option that was better or more makeable. That might be missed, right? So just food for thought. I think that's important. I don't think many teams do that. I think they should. So just food for thought on that one.
I would say, Pat, that a lot of times, particularly with the younger people here, the alarm bell isn't going off in the back of the head soon enough
Right?
until it's too late.
Almost
right?
too
You've
late.
only got a shot or two left.
Right.
And now you're in an impossible situation, right?
For sure, 100%. Yeah, and that hits it on the head, because that goes with this. That goes with, you know, playing to your team's capabilities, right? Everyone's got to have some probable makes, and you know what? Sometimes ends are going to happen like that just out of execution, right? And that's fine. That happens to everybody. Like, that just will happen from time to time. But what we want to try and minimize is the ones that aren't from execution, that are from skipping yourself into a corner, right? And it's easier to do that with this rule. That's the thing. So really important to have, you know, some thought in mind with respect to these philosophies. Again, it all comes back to that. And the first one on the list kind of covers that, right? Especially with hammer. So absolutely, totally agree. Skipping, it's not easy. Skipping and calling the game means thinking in a way to allow your teammates to succeed at all costs, period. That's your job. And that seems pretty simple and straightforward, but sometimes we forget about that, right? So I think that's important. You know, you're trying to make everyone better on the team as a skip, and so let's just keep that in mind for the skips and again the coaches here. Giving your teammates the same shot if when possible, especially if it can be back to back, and that's something that I'll tell again the younger players for sure. That's hugely important. And you know, when you think about it, and you guys will be playing this year or watching the teams play this year. You'll see this. You know, just think about that. You'll see opportunities to do that, and just watch to see if it's happening or not. But I think at all levels, I mean, that's true of at all levels. That just makes that next shot so much easier and so much more makeable. Icing to help take into account your teammates' tendencies, both weight and line. That's a good little discussion to have with your team as well, if that's the skip's job with respect to your team, or if you're going to let the thrower kind of dictate that. But you want to have that discussion because you don't want to both be doing it as well, right? And calling shots with good plan B alternatives. And I think that's also more important with this rule, just because there will be more plan B alternatives with more rocks in play. So just looking to see what gives the wider range of actually something okay happening with a shot versus a shot that, you know, unless it's perfect, it's not great. And that helps your teammates out. That goes back to well, the first 2 points basically as well. All right. And we touched on this, but use the strategy that can be backed up with your team's shot-making ability. Start with the skip's capabilities and move down to the lead and help create your team's strategy accordingly. Ensure the skip has more probable makes as often as possible at an end's conclusion. And same one, you'll hear me say this once or twice more, but a lot of ends don't have to be played as the 5-rock rule. It may only be used when the team with last rock wants to be even more offensive. Okay? Everyone all right so far? All good? Make sense?
In that last comment, but all ends are still the 4-rock rule, correct?
Well, all ends are potentially 5-rock rule. Like, the rule doesn't change, but how you play it can, right? Because really, at the end of the day, the team with last rock dictates if that rule is really used or not, right? At the end of the day, so yeah, for sure. All right, so the next thing I want to just have a little chit chat about is I want to put ourselves in the position where we're the team with last rock now. So talking about the rule, talking about utilizing the rule a little bit, and want your opinions as well. But let's talk about kind of if we want to use the rule. Obviously, then we want to throw a couple guards potentially, maybe. So let's talk about the corner guards a little bit then. So what are the different ways that we can kind of utilize the rule with respect to corner guards? So we're the team with last rock. what are the different ways that we can throw our two guards? Going to be corner guards, right? Because we have last rock, so we don't want to, I mean, the middle might get messed up anyway, right? So going to be corner guards. So I mean, typically you'll see the standard kind of across the sheet, right? So that's good? Everyone's good with that as a way to kind of throw your two guards? Depends on the ice for sure. So obviously we always kind of strive for them fairly straight across, because if you get it into this situation, you know, later on a double peel can be made maybe, right? If it's really curling too high, is almost useless because you can get around it and still take something out, right? So what do we need with this rule kind of in place, and if we're going to do this from time to time, where best are these corner guards if we throw them across the sheet like this? What's an important point about kind of their positioning?
You only need to be fairly wide if you're playing on swingy ice.
Right. So playing on swinging ice, exactly, but also I think really important now is, you know, before you might want them kind of middle 8 foot or maybe even the 4 foot line depending on the ice, but consider this. You know that if you do that, you know where the other rocks are going from the other team, right? They're going, you know, probably top button or top 4, maybe top 8, and the third one might even be a tight guard or what have you, right? Some way of that. It's going to be in the middle. But the other reason you want these fairly wide is that you really want still both paths to the button if you need it, right? So the minute you start closing this off, and there's 2 or 3 red ones in here, you know, now life gets a little difficult. What did we say with hammer? You want to make sure you can score a point, right? At least. Even if things don't go well, even if you never really get to those corner guards, you want to have some sort of avenue potentially to score, right? And so you really don't want to block off this draw. So you want that line to the button if at all possible on both sides, ideally. Okay, and to do that, they have to be pretty wide for sure. All right, maybe edge of 8, maybe, I mean, even into the 12 isn't terrible, right? So absolutely, for sure. I think the other thing too is you don't want them too long. You might not want them here either, and why is that? What are the reasons why you wouldn't want them really, really tight potentially? A little harder to get around, right? Definitely, yeah, that's one for sure. What's another one? One more I can think of.
Well, when you
Two
do
more.
get the opportunity to hit, when they can roll in,
Yep.
make life more miserable.
Absolutely, and or shorter run back if you do get around it. What's the last one I can think of? What's the last one? And you're going to start seeing, this is a shot that we don't really think of yet, but you're going to start seeing it for sure, especially in teams that are up as a way of defending against it. Yeah, they're going to take you in easy and then hit it, right? So just some thoughts on the positioning. If you do decide to do the cross the sheet thing, those are kind of the thoughts you want to have in mind with respect to that. All right? Not too long, makes it sound pretty tough. Not too long, not too tight, wide, but ideally, you know, have your spot in mind and you know, try to hit it with those, obviously, right? So what's another way we can throw our guards that you may have seen a little bit on TV? Is there another way we can do it? Yeah, so you've seen this. Now, sometimes this is as a result of a mistake with the first one, right? So if somebody does throw that long one, you know, how are you, like, what are you gonna do with that, right? Well, some teams will then bury that one, so you still can't hit, and that's kind of a way of, you know, somewhat correcting your mistake, which is good. But some teams are actually doing that on purpose as well. Why do you think? What's potentially good about that? Yeah, so it's tough double peel, obviously, right?
You're guaranteed one side to get to the bottom.
Good, yeah. You got one avenue clear right off the bat, right? So, yeah, really good. You don't have to worry about really, you know, if they were a little tighter, you're worried about getting to the button for sure your single point, while you've still got this whole half of the sheet as well. So, absolutely, yeah. I think another thing is, have you guys ever played on ice that, you know, you throw to the wing and it kind of curls nice, but it gets to a point it kind of stops? Might not very fully, or it's tough. You get to a point and it just kind of stops there. So, if you notice that, this is a great option because you can throw these a little tighter and get that curl still, right? Because you're not worried about blocking off that path. Does that make sense? Yeah, for sure. For sure. And what you decide to do is totally up to you, whether you throw the little tighter one. I mean, I think it's always easier to throw the little tighter one first and then on top of it. But sometimes this will happen by mistake, and then you know, it's just like a come around basically, right? So, good. Anything else? Any other options? Those are kind of the two I know, but I'd love to hear if somebody has another good one. That's great. Does that make sense though? Why you maybe pick, and you can do, there's no right or wrong with these, right? But again, it's just thinking about the situation. Now, here's another one. So you might have a thought in mind, for, you know, that you're gonna throw maybe 2 guards, but also consider this, you know, the first rock of the end goes here by your opposition, while you're gonna throw your corner guard. Maybe the second rock of the end is back here too. Well, then you might not care. You might throw it there. You might not care, right? But if the first 2 rocks are, you know, here and here, you know, then you might be a little careful. You don't even have to throw the second corner guard, right? Which we can talk a little bit about as well coming up here. But see where those rocks are by your opposition as well, because that also may determine what you do or how hard you push, or if you're a little more careful with the situation. Just because you decided in an end that you want to play a certain way, again, be open to thinking on your feet and quickly changing based on what you see in front of you as well, right? Because all of a sudden, this isn't very risky anymore. In fact, those are good for you, right? So then you can feel free to push a little harder maybe if you want. So just have an open mind, and that's where I think these philosophies are good, because I think as a whole province, we want to get away from trying to memorize and more into learning how to think, learning how to react, and adjusting to the situation that kind of comes before us with respect to all this. And it's even going to be, there's going to be more opportunity for that as we go forward with this rule, for sure. Okay? Questions about that?
Yeah, are we going to talk about defense then against the word red rocks?
Yep, right now.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Perfect.
What is it?
Yeah, for sure. So defending without hammer. So let's talk about it. What are our options? So we're up now. We don't have last rock, and we're up now. And we know that the team is going to, as much as possible, utilize the rule to its fullest. And we just discussed what the options are for them. They're either going to throw, you know, across the sheet guards, or maybe the same side. So what are we doing? Where's our first rock go? Where do we want it, roughly?
Top 4.
Top 4? Is everyone good with that? So why do we want it there?
You're shrinking the rings to like the play area really to the 4 foot. Like
Yeah.
make it harder on him to.
What was point number 2?
Control.
Control. What would, maybe it was point number 3. Dictate where the end is, where and how the end is played. That was point number 3. Yeah, you're right though. Right? So where would we like the end to be played, or where do we want the opposition to waste their rocks?
Right down the middle.
Down the middle, right? For sure, 100%. So yeah, everyone good with that? Okay. Everyone good with that? Okay, so where's this one go? So let's say in like, hardly ever in control, but let's say, you know, a few points up, maybe 3 points up or some situation where we know they're throwing 2 guards, right? Could only be 2 points up, whatever. But where's this guy going?
Well, you can still throw that just short.
Yeah, you can.
You can throw it top 12, but you can throw it just short. Now they've got a decision to make.
Yeah.
Are they gonna throw another corner, because that's what they're wired for?
Yeah.
If they do that, then guess what? Now, blue is gonna be chasing red for at least another 2 or 3 shots to get out of the end, to create some offense.
For sure. Yeah.
I feel like if you go top 12, then you know they're going to throw the corner anyway, and you can throw that guard in your next one, and you already have 2 in the center in good playing position with a guard, right?
Yeah.
So you know, like, they can't really they can throw around their corner, but I mean, you can start peeling and roll the center. Now you got 2 center guards with 2 behind it,
Yeah.
so they're kind of looking at some trouble anyway.
So there's no right or wrong here, right? It's kind of part of this is about knowing your opposition as well, and knowing or thinking you know what they may do, right? So a lot of teams that are, you know, up and feel good about things and know their opposition is going to throw another guard here will probably do something like that, likely. Some may go here though, for sure, and that's definitely not wrong either. So let's play that out. So this one goes here, this one goes here, and where does this one go? If you're trying to defend against the rule, where would you like this one?
Right in the middle, between the 2 blues.
Somewhere in that vicinity? Okay, so is this good?
It's not.
No, you can draw behind. You can draw around.
Yeah, I don't hate that either.
Not bad. So here's my thought on this. Okay, so you want this third one. If you throw the first 2 in, you want this third one in a position that you know they're going to hit it, but it's not that easy a run back. And there's a small area there where that both criteria kind of meet, right? And that's exactly where you want that rock, because you want as many rocks wasted there. You know, you want them to miss this a whole bunch of times, and then the corner guards aren't going to be in play, and you might steal, and it's a great thing, right? It's a nice feeling. If you're here, what's maybe not great about that? A little easier to run back, or if you slide in, they can make a double, maybe a roll, and all of a sudden the end is just changed in a heartbeat, right? So you got to be a little careful with that, right? Conversely, if it's really good ice, curling a fair bit, say, and it's up here, they're not going to run that back, right? And that's kind of a useless guard anyway. And so the minute they kind of make this little tap and roll behind the corner, now it's dicey again. You're not feeling great if you're red, right? Because then what do, right? So I think that's the important point there is, in a position where you know they've still got to make the run back, but it's a little bit more of a difficult run back. Because the whole goal in defending is you want a bunch of rocks wasted here. And then you can decide. You might start peeling these corners then, right? Or you might decide you want to keep replacing and kind of push it a little bit too. And that's kind of, again, there's no right or wrong there. That probably is very much score dependent as well. All right, and who you're playing dependent for sure. But that's probably how you want to look at defending. Now the other option we talked about was this for the second one, right? So now we got that. So where are we going with the third one if we do that? Where would you like this one if you're red and up a few points and? Anybody? Throw it away.
Can't you go behind their corner?
right? Tough shot because it's tight, but yeah, I mean, if you could do that, you've basically just done the same thing as before, just made it a lot more difficult on yourself, basically, right? So then you wouldn't do that, or try not to. But yeah, you definitely could do that. So somebody said around here. So what do you guys think of that?
I'm happy if I'm blue.
Yeah, so remember one of the points was point number 2. Yeah, try and dictate where that end is played, right? And where are we starting to dictate if we do that? Yeah, which isn't great, right? Not ideal. I mean, there may be instances where you want to block off a corner, potentially, right? But just caution with that a little bit, right? Because the minute it starts going to the sides, the end turns in an awful hurry. So just be a little careful with that. You know, if it ever slides back here, or if blue just makes a really good shot, you know, then they're one shot away from pretty easy 3, in fact, 2 for sure, maybe more, right? So I think just a little bit careful with that for sure.
What if red threw another guard, like on top of that guard? Kind of staggered almost, maybe to one side? Just kind of really, yeah.
Yeah.
That's true, but you're taking away the corner, really. That's a tough draw.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, there's no wrong in that. They're gonna, for sure, you know, they're gonna waste a rock here.
Yeah.
I think when they're straight on, it's not always gonna work that way. So sometimes you're gonna have to improvise, though, right? But this is hard because even if they make contact here, they might leave a center guard too, which is good, right? Because they're gonna have to be close to nose to make this run back. So straight in a row is, I think, the best defense in that case. You will see this though when teams are significantly up on really good ice. You're gonna see, instead of doing like something like this on purpose. Maybe you have seen that already. So Kevin Cooey we used to do that lots in the 4-rock rule, and he will do it a little bit in this rule too when they get up, because they're just such good hitters, right? But and the reason for that is this, you know, if you're not quite perfect with these, that's basically a guard, another guard, right? Right? And that, on good ice, you'll see that, like, teams will play that shot, and then that's not great either. Now, you know, maybe it's like this and they can get around this way or whatever, right? But so in games where they're way up, you might actually see a stagger like that, and if you do, that's why, is that they're not trying to make a guard basically with staggers in the middle. And so with this, these are all just easy little run backs, and that's why you'll see that as well. But I would say that's more in a really control, you know, if the game gets away a little bit early and it's, you know, you still got to play a few ends, obviously, because you never know, but the team's okay giving up 2 kind of thing, that's when you'll see that probably, right?
Now, what situations have you played the tick shot on a corner?
Tick shot on a corner?
Yeah.
Again, if it's like tight and you're up, like significantly up, you can try and tick it in, right?
And coming outside in at it, kind of trying to...
Yeah, I would think you'd play, I mean, that would be player preference probably, but most people would probably play it like that, right? And try and tick it in for sure, so.
So it would be close to the rings where you would...
Yeah,
or too
well.
close to the center line, like they came too close to the center line on the corner? Like,
Yeah.
even if it was higher, yeah.
Well, I don't think where the center
Or
line,
like a
because,
foot or so.
yeah, I think the whole goal is you got to get that. If you're going to play it, you want it in the house, right?
Right.
For sure. But you also don't want to leave yours as a corner guard in doing so.
Exactly.
So probably doesn't matter closeness, like probably less likely the closer it is to the center line. You'll still see the ticks as we know them from the other team when you need to score a point, right? You know, when you're really happy scoring a point, you might still see ticks on the center guard. But ticks on the corner guard are going to be more likely if they're up fairly handily and it's tight, basically, right?
So if you're blue and you've already got one corner,
Okay, like this.
Yeah, would you ever try for your second blue one, maybe a little tip shot on the center line and try to tap over yourself for a corner? And setting up the second corner and then getting rid of that center line thing?
Yeah, you
Like,
could.
if you're tight like with that.
You could. So that could be a
Sort of a super
an option shot a little bit. So yeah, actually that's one that we're going to talk about. We can talk about it right here basically. So in a situation, and there are little wrinkle shots you can play that you don't necessarily throw the 2 guards. I mean, you can still score 2 without throwing 2 guards, right? We all know that, or 3 or whatever. I mean, that's what we just used to do just last year and all the years before, right? And sometimes it's safer. So you might, if you don't want to push too hard, or, you want to kind of make sure you score, but kind of go after a safe deuce or what have you. There are different shots you can play. One definitely is, again, good ice conditions, and you can do it. A great shot is a little come around, tap this back and stay there, right? So what have you done there? What's one good thing that you've really done there in doing that?
Fighting for the center.
You definitely have control of this side of the sheet right now, right? Which is awesome. This rock is fantastic. It's just a lot of people don't use that or practice that, but if you guys can get really good at that little tap, not just this freeze, because we all know what's going to happen next with that, right? Is this is going to happen, and then it's just going to be a, it's either going to be a steal or a force unless somebody misses a few shots in a row, but that's really not what you want with hammer necessarily. But if you can ever get really good at this little tap like this and stay edge on edge or have an angle like that, oof, that's dynamite. And the good thing about that shot is if you miss it, you're probably doing something like that, right? Which is also pretty good option B, right? For sure. For sure. And even if you just tick it over and roll in, that's even not bad when you think about it. Yeah, for sure, I agree. Okay, any questions on that? All good? Makes sense? All right. All right. Good. Okay, so next I just wanted to talk just about a few shots that you can play like that. So that's one for sure. Early in a game, this is real obvious, but maybe not, I don't know. But early in a game, with last rock, and red goes in, maybe this is the first end, maybe this is the second end. Tight game, obviously, because it's just started. Some teams might do that, right, and just get right into it, right, obviously. Just food for thought, because this is where the rule has changed, right? What if you hit and roll on that? What's red gonna do? What's red gonna do? Second rock of the game. They're gonna hit it. They're not gonna throw a card, right? They're gonna hit it, right? Well, now you can, that still can't be hit. And now red is immediately, I used to hate this. I used to hate this when, you felt 2 rocks into the game and you felt like you were chasing already, right? But this is exactly how red feels right now. Because what do they do? What are they going to do now? Complete no risk, right? The house is wide open. There's no risk at all for blue at this point. What's red do? They might, yeah. Like that's probably a good call, right? They don't want to draw around this. We just established that, right? They don't want the end plate around the corner guard. If they try and take it away, well, blue can tap that back here, and then it's just game on, right? Maybe they'll do that, but who cares, right? I mean, so anyway, real simple, right? But you can do that now. You can do that, right? Because that guard can't be hit. So if teams do that, really, like I used to drive me crazy when people would just kind of watch the first rock come down and it, come down and they end up not really getting too excited and just nose this. Well, then red noses it back and you've just lost your opportunity to do that, right? Like try and make this hit and roll. Like really try and make it. It's a huge shot if you think about it early in the game, right? Because that just opens up all sorts of possibilities. If you do this and you throw that corner, well then they're going to do that and that's not as good, not near as good, right? So just food for thought. That's one real simple, obvious little one, but one that I don't think we really would think of before the start of this year.
Well, and I think too, even in the simplest terms, you turn around and you're changing shot on their opposition.
Totally.
Even if you're only going 6 inches.
100%.
You just change their ice.
That too, exactly. Yeah, little things like that are huge, right? Absolutely. Especially in the first end when 6 inches wider is brand new pebble, right? And they throw it a little quiet and that's how you get misses, right? So, for sure. So another one, if you don't want to throw 2 corner guards, another one that I think is just fantastic. So this might be a case where, maybe they go short this time. We talked about I think my third one. No, the fourth one I had was that little tap back. So just remember that one. But consider this as well. So center guard, and you don't want to get crazy into it, right? Like you want to kind of keep maybe a blank option open. You don't want to go crazy, right? So you might not throw corner in this case. But you also don't want to have a pile of, you just don't want to get big trouble around the center either. So consider on purpose not burying this. Okay, so like edge on edge, or maybe an inch buried or something. Okay, so why would we do that? Because normally we're just trying to lob it in there, and then you know what red's going to do, right? They're going to lob it in there, and then there's going to be, 5 minutes later, it's going to be an absolute mess again, and we've seen that time and time again, right? So why is that good? That we've meant to do that.
If they wanted to hit, they probably can't save the shooter. If red wanted to take out the blue.
Yep.
If red comes around on the in turn, you've got a beautiful little rock to tap up to. You're still in control of that side of the sheet.
Bingo, that's what I'm looking for, right? Point number. Right away it's uncomfortable again, right? Because we're so used to lobbing it in there. Well, how do you freeze to that? Like, what do you do with that? How do you freeze to that? It's tough, right? Can't really make a good freeze to that, really. Because the whole thing about a freeze is having an angle with the guard, right? That's the whole point of a freeze. But if we're here all of a sudden, I don't know, if they go there, that's great, because we can just kind of stay on a high angle and tap that back, and now we've got all sorts of good stuff happening, right? And they can't hit and roll. The key is they can't hit and roll in. That's the key. You want it in a spot where they can't kind of get inside you on that, right? But if they can't, then you're right, yeah. You've got control of this side of the sheet early. It might not stay that way, but it's a darn good way to start the end, right off the bat, right?
And the tolerance is if you're shorter rather than deeper, you've still got something really nice to work with. If somebody does come up 2-3 feet short, you're still in control of that area.
Sure, yep.
Pat,
Yep.
I'm assuming this is early in the end.
Yep.
So your red can come down and tap the blue behind the tee line. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, in essence, red is still in an enviable position, and there's potential backing on the right-hand side of the sheet, correct?
Yeah, there is, yeah. Yeah, for sure. If they want to do that. But that's also danger for them, because remember, they don't have last rock. Like a lot of red teams wouldn't do that, for sure, I guarantee you, just because yes, it's early, but leaving opposition rocks in, even if they're behind the tee line, that's better for the team with hammer than without. Put it that way.
Right.
Yeah. Just not real comfortable. But yeah, definitely could. Definitely could. And they have a little bit of control of that, but then, I mean, same thing. Then you might see that, or who knows, right? Blue has all kinds of different options then as well. So,
Right.
yeah. Okay, just food for thought. Don't always have to bury around a guard fully. Just think about that, because that can be a good one for sure. Okay. Okay. Last kind of one that we haven't really talked about yet, but you know, you get this, and maybe now this time you do throw your corner guard. Okay. Reds, put it in here somewhere. Doesn't really matter too much. Maybe in there or whatever. So what's another? Well, there's a few plays here. We should actually talk about them. But what are a few options that blue can do if they don't want to throw their second corner guard? So they don't, you know, yeah, they'd like to get two, but they're okay getting one. They just can't have a steal in this case, right? So you could hit these, right? You could try and hit and roll or make the double or whatever, for sure. Yeah, they still can't peel this. So, yeah, that's one for sure. What's another? Freeze. In here? Yeah, could do that. Could do that. It's initially you've got small rings to work with though, right? If red decides to start, well, depending what they do, obviously. Might be good, might work out okay. Not easy, but yeah, you could do that. You could tap these around, right? Like, I mean, we've seen that a million times with the 4-rock rule, where you kind of, you know, maybe a perfect shot is to kind of make the little tap and roll and get a little pocket going back here. I mean, that'd be fantastic, right? Doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you just kind of move them around a little bit and something like that, but that's even not too bad. You're probably going to score, right, with that shot? And you still will have a chance for two, for sure. One more. Now we talked about the hits, so hit.
We could just draw around.
Yeah, could just go around the corner too, right? For sure. For sure. Yep. Absolutely you can. And what's red doing now? Can't peel this still.
Probably guarding, no.
Yeah, they might do it. Probably are, right?
You gotta peel like the one way, so.
Yep. And then you're into that, make the run back in the next shot or two, or it could be trouble, right? But if you do, you got a chance. So the one point I want to make with this is, yeah, like there's nothing wrong with the draw. That's great. There's also nothing wrong with the draw if it's way back there. And we're ingrained in our mind as don't be behind the tee, don't be behind the tee, right? I mean, that's just been driven into all of us as far as if you're behind the tee on a draw, it's bad. But I'll argue that this is the one situation that it might be actually really good. I've seen by accident, I've seen this a whole bunch of times that this draw has gone in here, not really called there, but gone back there. And a lot of times that suckers this draw in out of the red, right? Because it's behind the tee. And now what's happening? You're playing to the wing. You've dictated now where the end is played, right? Which is one of those points that we made earlier, right? So consider doing that on purpose, would be my point there. Does it make sense? You guys, if you were red, you would consider that, right? To kind of nullify that. A lot of people will play that. And you know what, if they don't, like if they go here or something or whatever, if you ever get a chance to, if you can ever make a couple shots, then you've got room to get another one in there or make a hit and roll in there or whatever as well, right?
Well, and the nice part too, Pat, is if you don't get fully buried, at least if you're behind the tee, they're hitting and rolling behind the tee.
Might still be there, yeah.
Come in half open on the 8 foot and get roll it back to the center line again.
Yep,
Drives you crazy.
yep. Here you force their hand. You force their hand into this, right? Here, just that little bit of uncomfort again, right? Which is odd because you'd think it wasn't a very good shot, right? But just consider that. I've seen that a whole bunch work out really well. So just keep that in mind.
That's usually where the skip is saying, I don't want to go around the corner guard, but the front end comes down and says, well, we don't know what we know.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, very, very true for sure. So, all right, good. Any questions? So the second handout I gave you was this guy right here. Okay, so this is just more of a, again, more of a bit of a food for thought thing. I think it's pretty interesting. Numbers I definitely have changed a little bit with respect to the 4 rock versus the 5 rock. But I think with the 5 rock rule, I think there's a couple different little scenarios that you want to have in mind. And so I'll give you an example of one, and you can look at this and derive whatever you like out of this, because again, important to kind of record what your team does, because you might not fall in the higher percentage and you might want to consider these differently in the first place. But it's sure nice to know the numbers too. So I'll give you an example. And usually it's in an 8-end game, usually it'll be the 7th end that this kind of comes into play a little bit with respect to how you want to approach that end, right? Obviously knowing that what happens in the 7th end sets up for the last end. So 1 up with last rock, playing the 7th end. Okay, 1 up with, playing the 7th end, and getting 1 to go 2 up, and giving up a steal to be tied up with, have exactly the same percentage of winning in the 8th end. So that makes everyone following me with that? So that might change how you approach that 7th end a little bit, right? I mean, getting 2 in the 7th end is fantastic because your percentage goes way up to win the game because you're 3 up now, right? So it's important to know that one, because if you have a shot that's even just the slightest bit possible for 2, it might be worth playing even if you give up a steal, because you know based on the numbers. Now your team could be different, and that's why you have to keep track of that. But based on the numbers, you haven't lost anything even if you give up that steal. So there's an example of, if you know this, you can then maybe work that to your advantage a little bit, or it might change a shot or how you play the end even, for that matter, right? So yeah, just keep that in mind. The old kind of 1 up without versus 1 down with scenario. Ladies were way better up based on the numbers being 1 up without. 58% to 42% winning that were 1 down with. The men were closer. The men were 52% to 48. So I think that's an important one to know. That one scenario we talked about in the 7th end, if you're 1 up with, the best case scenario, better than getting 1 or even obviously giving up the steal, is having a blank that end, because then your percentage also goes almost as high up as if you get 2 that end. So that's another little wrinkle in that same scenario. Yeah, so anyway, there's a whole bunch on here that you can make up basically, but the whole point of this is just have a look at it and see if it changes any of your kind of end plans on that other sheet that we handed out at all, specifically for the second last end of the game, right? And figure out where you want to be or where you'd rather be in relation to these numbers. I actually asked Jerry Gertz about if they had a number on teams that throw 2 corner guards, and if, you know, what percentage of the time do they actually get to start using those corner guards? And they're actually gonna be, he said there's gonna be a way of tracking that too. They don't have it yet, but it's coming. So I think that's also an interesting number, because that also will justify, I guess, potentially how hard we push. And again, I think that coming full circle goes back to every team and the capabilities and what they are, you know, what they can do, what kind of shots they can make as well, playing to your team's strengths. So, all right. So, if you want, I've got a few in that first part of the presentation there. I've got a few just different scenarios. So, if you as tables want to look through and talk about them and kind of what you do, if you want some of that, I can throw that up here.
Didn't win the World Max, so I was pretty upset.
Now, is there a new rule book out?
It's on its way. Yeah, it's just on its way. We haven't, like, the office doesn't have them yet, but they're supposed to be coming right away.
And that'll have the doubles rules as well, mixed doubles?
I would assume it'll have everything, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Anne Marie said she ordered them just this week. The rule books, is that what you're talking about?
Yep.
Yeah, 'cause I called the office earlier this week. Anne Marie said she just placed the order on Monday, so probably about a week or so before the books are in from.
So chit chat about these as you like. You know, we maybe talked about some of them, what you would do with this kind of next rock. Any questions, let me know. Or if you want to go through them, let me know.
First choice.
Takes a Snapchat. I think it was like the 2 of them.
Oh, yeah.
Saturday.
Yeah, sign if you want to. Sure.
I'm not saying you guys decide. Riley, what would you do?
Riley.
Yeah, absolutely. Go right ahead.
What's the scenario?
I don't know.
It's pretty hard for me to tell.
0-0.
Well, on you. You good, Jake? You good?
Oh no!
Riley?
Probably part of zero.
That's tough. Yeah, that's tough.
Second person?
First
But what I do different than that is I throw a second card.
the first step. And if you're red,
They throw around my off.
yeah. But would they though? Because what if they threw a corner guard? You would go around, right?
Yeah, that's why they go around.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if they throw
That's
another
not
corner
good.
guard, you just throw another one around, you'd be in situation or anything. Right, so I guess the only difference would be is if they would go around.
Different.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
So then when you're chasing, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Ah, okay. So it's totally different. Then, yeah.
Different, I guess.
Yeah. Everything. Yeah.
I feel like you're gonna end up in a situation.
Almost, yeah. Except you know,
If they go that red, it's just basically back to
Oh,
strategy that
that's good. This year.
Last year, first year.
or like you said, blue could do, if you guys, if you threw that center, blue could do that edge to edge. Yeah, red. If she sees it, then he does that little tap, or forwards all the doors, taps his back to the top four or whatever. And then sitting pretty good, there's 2 good guards.
That's awesome.
He just hits the roll, hits the roll, and he just tries to play in the wing.
Yeah, no worries.
Even if you're-
Okay, you got it. Yeah. Take care.
no matter where.
Because if the odds
So,
are,
well, yeah, if you're red and say
Oh, okay. I was gonna say we were kind of making a call.
So you're gonna run? Okay, yeah, take care. Oh, yeah, take care.
Yeah, that was the one
Yeah.
So it's red.
We're blue.
Yeah.
We're always blue.
Blue shot.
Yeah.
So red's up by 2.
You check it in.
Fourth end, so you should know what you're doing.
Ah. Cool.
Okay, and then
You can try.
red throws center guard.
You can try to double and roll.
I honestly don't
That's
hate
good.
that.
Oh, good for you.
I honestly don't.
You know, that
hate,
it's
I just don't hate the hit and roll.
Yeah.
But you're down by 2, right?
Yeah, so you need points. That's why I don't
There you go.
mind.
There you go. Perfect.
Guard.
Better to be ahead of the game.
Let them throw it another
Oh,
center.
that's good.
You gotta be fucking ace at your feels though.
Oh yeah. Well, no matter what you're
Yeah.
like
If you're playing it this thick, right?
like that double. That
lead
structure.
throw, you try to double with your lead throw too.
Good.
So it's almost a better
Yeah, hopefully that one's
situation.
up
If you do go around,
Yeah, awesome.
I don't hate that either. Bearing one.
You guys still on this? Still talking about this one? A little bit? You
Yeah.
want another one?
Sure. Red's up by 3. I guess you don't
Sorry,
have
I
that.
stuck with that. Okay. It's up by 3. Oh, it's throw center.
Yeah, that's true.
Why not? What's the worst that's gonna happen?
You could do
They
it.
can try to.
Try to take my blue in the middle and roll out. Take away one of their corners.
So this one we talked about a little bit, right?
Yeah. But red's up by 3 this time, so it's. Do you want lots in play if you're red?
I think you.
Well, that's the one thing. There's no avoiding it, probably,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because 3, you can give up 3 in a heartbeat, right?
Yeah.
With 2 corner guards. So. Hey, yeah, you bet, guys. Yeah. Oh, good deal. Good deal. Take care. You betcha. Yeah, you bet. Yeah, that's the one thing. There's no, you can't.
Yeah.
The minute you start, well, you have to will yourself to put more rocks in play. But the minute you don't, usually things go south.
Yeah.
Right?
So you kind of gotta play with it.
So the whole thing, again, defending, the whole thing is to get them somehow. The best defense is having them waste rocks in the middle.
Yeah.
And waste rocks meaning hitting something that's out of the house that they can't be in the house with, which is that guard, right?
Even if you're just off center this way with the guard.
Yeah, because they're all kind of.
So they're staggered
Then
a
you're
bit.
taking away the one avenue. They're just left.
Which rock of these 2 red ones? So which one's kind of would you say is more important to err on guarding?
The top one.
Turf for sure, exactly, right? You'd think this one is more important, but really, at the end of the day, this one probably is, right? The number 2. I don't know if you can see that.
Can't see that.
Can't see the arrow. Yeah, the higher one for sure, right? Okay. Whoop.
Hey Pat,
Yo.
just an off topic.
Yeah.
Have they noticed is there any pressure on the shot on that lock? It's a 5 rock rule. Is it taking any longer to start or they time
Well, it
management?
can, yeah. You have to be careful for sure, yeah. It can. Like if you play 8 full ends of lots going on. yeah,
What happens?
Pretty.
Well, you can throw guard.
You can throw the quarter guard on
Yeah.
corners.
Oh, red
Yeah.
has hammer.
But then blue's gonna go on top anyways, right? On top of your back.
Well,
They could come around.
I think if you
Like
throw a
that's-
corner guard, they're gonna go around because you got 2 center guards that are perfectly in line.
And you're going there
You're
anyways.
gonna have to make a tricky double peel because you might jam on your back.
What do you think with this one?
I think
You're
red.
either-
I would throw the corner.
You're either throwing the corner or going like top 4.
Yeah, around the blues.
So this is an interesting one. I mean, you can go. So if you say you fully bury like top button or top 4, what's blue doing for sure?
Come around.
They're just gonna freeze to you, and then that nullifies this rock forever, right?
Yeah.
So what about the shot we talked about? What about not quite burying fully on purpose with this one?
Yeah.
Because that
If they like, are you coming around this way? You're talking like away
Yeah,
from
like I actually, yeah, it could be both ways. This way's probably better.
But even if you're not fully buried, can't they still try just to hit and flop under still? Like it's harder
Well,
than
if it's
draw.
On this one? On the number one?
Mine too.
No, he's talking if you're red, second
Yeah.
one goes like what you said.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can.
And then
It's
blue.
got to be good enough that you can hit full underneath, though, right?
Yeah.
So a piece buried, a tiny piece, even edge on edge, they can't really hit full, right? For sure. Yeah. Yeah, it can't be wide open. Like if it's wide open with this much air, that's not a good shot because the minute they can get underneath you, it defeats the purpose of even playing that, right? But if it's edge on edge or a quarter buried or something like that, then it's good, pretty good, pretty good. Because the next one you can start, well, you can do whatever you want. Like this is an end in the seventh end of your red that, what would be your three things on this sheet